Shalom to the Israelite community. Shalom to the Israelite community. This is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood. Alright, Israelites. We got ancient enemies. Ancient enemies that's been around for a long time. A lot of them have got name changes. Man, they got name changes because the people who inherit or got our heritage after we abandoned it were Babylonian scribes. So they was able to change names and so forth when our heritage fell into their hands. They gave a lot of biblical peoples that's in the Tanakh different name changes, and they kind of like, try to camouflage their history. That's like today, don't nobody go by the name Edom. Man, you got to look in the Tanakh in ancient history and look at the lands where the Edomites were and the people that occupy the land. That's like, now the Tanakh said that Edom would take and have control over Jerusalem. And we know only two people got control over Jerusalem right now in the promised land, and that's going to be the people that's called the Arabs. The Arabs today, and then it's going to be Ashkenazi. Ashkenazi basically control it, but we know that Ashkenazi is of the Japhetic tribes, and we know the Ashkenazi come in our heritage under the name Scythian. So the rest of the people that got control of the promised land, that mean they got name changes. You know what I'm saying? That's like the Palestinians are going to be ancient Philistines, the Philistinians, and some of the Phoenician tribes, and a lot of the ancient peoples that we didn't destroy when we left Egypt. So they're going to get a name change meant to try to hide them. But they all fall up under the Semitic terms, which means Semitic means semi, half and half. So they have for each one of those groups and tribes that we didn't destroy, like the Ammonites, the Moabites, and so forth. And then you got the Ishmaelites, and then you got the Edomites. Now, I want to read something in Tanakh history where it was said who our enemies would be. Who our enemies would be. We know our original enemies were the tribes that we were supposed to destroy. The Canaanite tribes, the Havites, the Amorites, and all those tribes that Prophet Moses named out, and that we were supposed to destroy them, and those were our enemies because they was contaminated with the Nephilim and so forth, and that we were supposed to destroy them. All the Canaanite tribes, we were supposed to get rid of them, but then it was some additional tribes that were classified as our enemies, and I'm gonna go into this in the Tanakh. All right, this is Psalms 83. O Yah, do not be silent, do not hold aloof, do not be quiet, O Yah. For your enemies rage. Look, it says, for your enemies rage. So they gonna be enemies of Yah. And you can kind of see this today in the religion that the other peoples created, that's not giving praise to Yah, but giving praise to different titles and so forth. And then that their religion has the Israelite heritage as the foundation, but it don't contain none of the curses or none of the things that the Israelites would go through or Israel's destruction. It wouldn't say nothing about us being in captivity, and then how they'll create their own prophets and their own peoples to try to say that Almighty Yah led them. But we know better. But look here. Do not be quiet, O Yah, for your enemies rage. Your foes assert themselves. They plot craftily against your people. Look, they plot craftily against your people. Take counsel against your treasured ones. They say, let us wipe them out as a nation. Israel's name shall be mentioned no more. A numbness in their counsel. They have made an alliance against you. The clans of Edom and the Ishmaelites. The clans of Edom and the Ishmaelites. Moab and the Hagarites. Gabal, Ammon, and Amalek, Philistia with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria too joins forces with them. They give support to the sons of Lot. Deal with them as you deal with Medine, But those are our enemies, and they was classified as enemies of Almighty Yah. And we can see why the Hagarites and the Ishmaelites would hate us Israelites. It's real simple to understand their hatred is because our father Abraham, who had a child by a Hagar, and Hagar was an Egyptian. And then how our mother Sarah sent her away with her son that she had by our father Abraham. Now check this out. It'll make sense for Ishmael and the Hagarites to be enemies to the Israelite, being that Ishmael was Prophet Abraham's firstborn, but the covenant was given to Isaac, who Almighty Yah said, he would be born, and he was born by extreme measures, being that our father Abraham was up in age and shouldn't have had a son, but the Creator said that Sarah, our mother, would have a child, and that became our father Isaac. So we can see how Ishmael would be against the Israelite tribes, and the Ishmaelites are classified as against the Israelites. All the way up to this day, man, the Ishmaelites, the Arabs who are Edomites, man, they are not for us. They are not for us, and we know how they came into Africa and what they did to us, and we know that they got an extreme case of prejudice men against pigment people that they don't even talk about, or that's not highlighted in the media, but how that they are considered racist too. That they mostly look at pigmented peoples as slaves and had them as slaves that the Ishmaelites have. So, they ain't no friends of the Israelites. And then we see how that the Ishmaelites, through the Palestinians, own stores in our communities, man, and how that they ain't been beneficial to us, and how they take wealth out, and how they look down on us Israelites, And then right now today, some of them know that we are Israelites, but they not advocating our return to the promised land, even while they going through what they going through with Ashkenazi, that they still trying to hold on to our lands that, belong to us. But look here, our mother Sarah, who got rid of Ishmael and his mama, so our father Isaac could inherit the covenant, and the covenant is the laws that would eventually come come to the Israelites. Now look here. And the Elohim visited Sarah as he had said, and the Elohim did unto Sarah as he had spoken, for Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time which the Elohim had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as Yah had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, Yah hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar. Those are the Hagarites. Those are the Hagarites that is mentioned in Psalms 83. The Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be higher with my son, even with Isaac. And this thing was grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And Yah said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of the bondwoman. And all the Sarah had said unto thee, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. See, in Isaac shall thy seed be called. So, we gonna send our mother Sarah, gonna send Hagar and Ishmael away. So we know that they would be enemies of the Israelites from then on out. All Isaac's seed, and because Ishmael didn't get the first rights. When you born first, you supposed to get the first rights. You supposed to get all your father's inheritance. It should come on you because you the firstborn. And then it split up with the rest. But here, that tradition was broken, and it was given to Isaac. Now the same with Edom. Let's go to Genesis 25. Genesis 25. And another thing, Ishmael went and married some Egyptian women. So, we know that the covenant, Almighty Yah be knowing ahead of time. He be knowing ahead of time. So that's why come the covenant couldn't go to Ishmael, because Ishmael went and had Egyptian women as, his wives and so forth. So, that wouldn't do no good. Look, and they dwelled in the wilderness. And his mother, look, and he dwelled in the wilderness of Paran. And his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. So it wouldn't make no sense for Prophet Abraham's blessings to inherit the land of Canaan to fall into the Egyptians' hands, and then they have a right to it. That wouldn't make no sense. So, Almighty Yah be knowing ahead of time. So that's why come the Hagarites and the Ishmaelites are the Israelites' enemy, because they didn't get first rights to the land. Now let's go look at Edom. Edom it is a descendant of Prophet Abraham through Isaac's son Jacob. But we know that Edom went off and married into the Canaanite tribes. The Canaanite tribes that we Israelites were supposed to destroy. And then he even went and made it with the Ishmaelites. So that would make Edom an enemy to us Israelites, and hate us, because Edom didn't get the first birthrights either. Our mother, Rebecca, saved the Israelite nation in the covenant from Prophet Abraham that Almighty Yah promised him the land. It is that, she sent Jacob in there to get the blessings from his father. She sent Jacob in there to get the blessings from his father Isaac, when it should have had fell on Edom, but Edom was already messing with them Canaanite tribes and had Canaanite women, so it wouldn't have did no good, you know what I'm saying, for the blessings in the covenant to be then went to Edom, because Edom went astray early over into the Canaanite tribes. Now let's go to let me see, Genesis 25:25. All right. And Isaac entreated the Elohim for his wife because she was barren, and the Elohim was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived, and the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And he went on to inquire of the Elohim, and the Elohim said unto her, two nations are in thy womb, and two manners of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there was twins in her womb. And the first come out red over like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bore them. So we know that Edom sold out. Edom sold out early. Edom sold out early, so it wouldn't be no good thing for Edom to had got the blessings. I got a video I made talk about how Rebekah saved the Israelite nation, you know, and then how she saved our father Abraham's promise from Almighty Yah, because Edom went over into them Canaanite tribes. Look, and Esau was, this is Genesis 26:34. And Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Bishmet the daughter of Elon the Hittite, which were a grief of mine unto Isaac and to Rebekah. Man, that was a grief of mine to them. Meaning that they son and went over into the Canaanite tribes and wasn't supposed to. Man, that was a terrible thing. That was a terrible thing, is that Edom went over into the Canaanite tribes, and man, that was trying to destroy Almighty Yah's promise. That was trying to destroy Almighty Yah's promise. He didn't have no respect for Yah to go into the Canaanite tribes and try to plant his seed there. You know, some of the Israelites messy. You know, Judah would go mess with but he stayed fast to what his father's teachings with worshiping Almighty Yah. Whereas you can't find nowhere in Tanakh where Edom wanted to worship and call on Almighty Yah's name. Look, this is Genesis 36. Esau took the wives of the daughters of Canaan, Adar, the daughters of Elon the Hittite, Bishma, and the daughters of Anah, the daughters of Zebon the Hittite, and Bishmath, Ishmael's daughter, sister of Nebojoth. And Adar bore him, you see, so he done went over into Ishmael, who was sent away and who would have a grudge, and then he turned around and go off into all the Canaanite tribes. All the Canaanite tribes. So, you know, that wouldn't be no good thing. And then you can see that on Sir, and Sir, what Edom settled, Edom would go into the serpent seed, you know, in Mount Sir. You know, that's what the Horites and those folks, you know, Edom would go off into those tribes and so forth. And then, you know, that would, you know, take Edom men away from Yah worship. You know, that would take Edom away from Yah worship. And then, you know, Ishmael, he ain't gonna be into Yah worship either. So, you know, that was why, you know, that our mother saved us with Rebekah sending Jacob in there to get the blessings from our father Isaac. But but Esau would have been the firstborn, and then he sold his firstborn rights. So, after he realized what he did, he gonna be an enemy to us Israelites. He gonna be an enemy to us Israelites. All right, so they hated Almighty Yah, and they would create religions. They would create religions, man. Let me see what this say. Let me see the clans of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moabites, and the Hagarites and Gabal. And then let me teach you Israelites something about the Cabal people. It is Cabal and global, and them giving praise to Baal, Cabal and Gabal, all them the same folks. And them were the merchants. These folks right here, those was the merchants that transported us to slavery, and then they gonna be in the Amorite held lands, Lebanon, Syria, and so forth. And then we know about them being enemies, and then they the hidden folks. You know what I'm saying? And look, you see in Genesis, in Psalms 83, and then you see Gabal and Ammon and Amalek and Philistia with the inhabitants of Troy. All right, that's gonna be these parts right here. That's gonna be these parts right there. That's gonna be them parts, Lebanon, Beirut, and so forth. That was Syria was an Amorite held land, and then we know that the Amorites translate into the Sephardists from Cyprus. From Cyprus, and then we know that they eventually ended up with our heritage and so forth. That they got our heritage too, and that they would hate us too. And I got a video proving that they hate us with a passion. They hate us with a passion. These folks, right here. Look, you see Sephardim, Sephardim. All right, those are Amorites from Babylon and Syria. They held those parts. And that they would be with the Phoenicians. And the folks that was in Troy and Babylon, and that they would be merchants with ships. And then a lot of Israelites say, we come over here on slave ships, but where the slave ships at? Is because they could transfer them slave ships into cargo ships carrying anything. And that once slavery was over, that they turned the ships back into cargo ships that would transport cotton and sugar and all the things that we harvest here in captivity. But at first, how they turned them into slave ships and with the chains and so forth. And then after slavery started winding down and we started producing the products, then they changed them back into cargo ships that would transport cotton and so forth. And that's the Gabal. Is Gabal. They the same folks. And they been our enemies and so forth, but they been slick head. You know what I'm saying? That's like the Phoenicians. Look here. Man, the Phoenicians. They was with the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were an ancient Semitic group of people who lived in the Phoenician city-state along the coastal strip in the Levant of the Eastern Mediterranean, modern-day Lebanon. All right, and then that's the Cabal. Look, this is the land right here. They're Amorites. And they would live on the coast here. coast here. Look, you see Babylus, you know what I'm saying? And they would live there. And then they would have ships, and they would sail all around the Mediterranean. They would sail all around the Mediterranean Sea, and then they would go over to the Americas. You know, that's why come you find Hebrew written in certain places in America in the name of certain parts around the world got Hebrew names, is because them folks that got our heritage sailed everywhere. Meaning they were sellers. Meaning they sailed on ships. You know, they sailed on ships and so forth. Alright, let's find some more about them. Let's find some more about them. Gabal. Alright, look, this is the Gabal land right here, and this is where they was. This is where they was right here in ancient times, you know. And they would be all over these parts. Look, you see Gabal right there. You know, that's part of Syria. You know, back in the days, that was Syria. And then the Cabal is those folks right there. Those folks right there, and they're from Syria. That's an Amorite land. You know, just the Sepharvaim were the scribes from Babylon that was on the Euphrates. That kept the false gods' name, Baal and everything else, you know, Eniki and all the Babylonian gods, all the fake gods that was against Yah worship, they was in control of it, and that they was on the Mediterranean, right there. Look, you see right there? That's where they was, and then that's the Cabal today. That's the Cabal today. You know, that's the Cabal today. You know, we're going to try to read up on some of that. Alright? Man, they rode in ships. We know they had ships, and they fixed the ships because they used to come to our land when we had control to do trade and stuff. And then they helped Solomon bring some of the wood down from them parts to help construct the temple that they was already made servants of. They was made servants of the temple under Joshua, the Gabonites and so forth. Those were Amorites too. The Gabonites were Amorites. And them Amorites was always lodged around the temple or whatever place that we had to worship. And then it fell into their hands when we went into Africa to do the Egyptian religion. Alright, let's find out some more about this. Cabal is the name. It's the same as Gabal, as in plot. You know what I'm saying? They know the meanings of it. They know the meanings of it. Look. The Cabal is in control of Western civilization because the Amorites who founded America were the conquistadors that come from Spain, you know, because it wasn't nothing for them to go to Spain when a temple was destroyed. Edom, and a temple was destroyed in 70 AD, is that they would take off to Spain and so forth, and then they would come over to the Americas as conquistadors on them ships that the Cabal had. You see what I'm saying? On them ships that the Cabal had. You know, the Cabal had the ships, look, global, Cabal, Gabal, it's all the same. And then, you know, they control the UN, they control NATO. They, you know what I'm saying, people try to say, oh, it's a Jewish conspiracy and all that stuff, but you know what I'm saying, behind the international order of institutions, you know, that international bankers cabal is Gabal, that was in the Bible. You know what I'm saying? And they've been dealing and trading and banking and all that stuff for ancient long time. That is the same as Gabal, you know, that was classified as the Israelites enemy in Psalms 83. You know, in Psalms 83 and so forth, it's the same folks, and then they're traditionally Amorites. You know, they the Amorites now. The Amorites can hide themselves today. You know, the Amorites can hide themselves today, but that global cabal, you know, it's Gabal. It's the same, you know, and they were our, our enemies, you know, it's classified as enemies of Yah. You know, anytime you could take Almighty Yah's children or the people who he gave the covenant to them and then strip them of their heritage and beat them down and keep them in slavery and then keep all kind of schisms to keep them in bondage and so forth, that you was definitely going to be an enemy of Almighty Yah, since Almighty Yah is for freedom and prosperity for all groups. He want everybody to worship him. But if you a group of people that's trying to keep the peoples from worshiping Almighty Yah and put them on false religions and fake gods, demigods, and all that stuff, introduce that to them, especially the people that got the covenant from Almighty Yah, then you is going to be an enemy of Yah. You know, you is going to be an enemy of Yah. So, you know, that's just what it is. You know, and can't nobody change that. Can't nobody change that. But a lot of people don't know that the cabal, that Gabal and cabal been in cahoots against the Israelite heritage going all the way back to biblical times and so forth. You know, to go all the way back to biblical times when we had the covenant. Now we know that Ammonites and the Moabites were our enemies and so forth, because the Ammonites and Moabites gonna mix up with them folks that we were supposed to destroy and sided with them. You see what I'm saying? And sided with them, and then we know that their father Lot went and hung out in Sodom and Gomorrah, and whereas Prophet Abraham didn't want no dealings with it. You know, so man, it's a lot going on, but that's why Edom, and the Ishmaelites are enemies to the Israelites, is because that they didn't get the covenant that was promised to the firstborn. See, they would have took and destroyed the covenant that Almighty Yah had promised Abraham by mixing in with the folks from the land that had the Nephilim in them that we were supposed to destroy. So, you know, Almighty Yah is real smart. He is real smart. And then that's why this punishment that we going through right now today is supposed to wake us up forever, not to ever abandon Yah worship. We ain't finna never abandon no Yah worship. Look here, let's read this. Let's see what it say. Let me see. This is Psalms 39. O Elohim, thou searchest me and knowest me. Thou knowest my down sitting and mine uprising. Thou understandest my thought afar off. Thou compassest my past and my laying down, and art acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Elohim, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain unto it, whether I should go from thy spirit, or whether shall I flee from thy presence. If I ascend unto the heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, thou is there. You know, minutes apart that I wanted to read that showed that Almighty Yah gave us the covenant, you know, and we Israelites are the only ones that he has known. You know what I'm saying? And that he trusted us with the law. You know, surely if thou shalt slay the wicked, O Elohim, depart from me. Therefore, ye bloody men, for they speak against thee wickedly, and then enemies take thy name in vain. See, that's what the enemies of Yah do. Did you not I hate them, O Elohim, that hate thee, and I am not, and am not I grieved with those that rise up against thee? I hate them with a perfect hatred. I count them mine enemies. Search me, O Elohim, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked ways in me, and lead me. So them folks didn't want to be led by Almighty Yah. They didn't want to be led by Almighty Yah. And another thing that we Israelites were who Almighty Yah bestowed the covenant upon, and everybody was supposed to learn for us. We were supposed to be a priestly nation, but we was tricked out the covenant by the non-believers. The Israelites, man, is easily to fall into the hands of the non-believers and follow their ways and trust in them and believe in the non-believers' ways, and that the non-believers are going to be the creators of the religions that's present today and so forth, and that how we Israelites, man, was supposed to never believe in these folks' religions. All right, let's go to 47. All right, and this is what I wanted right here. This is Psalms 47:19. He showed his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He had not dealt so with any nation, and as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye to Elohim. So the Ishmaelites, and the Edomites don't have no correct way of worship, because Almighty Yah gave his covenant that was for the whole earth, was supposed to come through Jacob and his descendants, the Israelites, and not through Edom or the Ishmaelites, who have created a religion today, and they use our heritage as the foundation and so forth. I can easily show, that man, that they took our heritage after we broke covenant, and then created them a religion off of it, and then they supposed to have what they call the last prophet, but we know the last prophet was in Malachi, the book of Malachi. He was the last prophet, man, before the Israelites' lights went out and so forth, and before we, was completely destroyed from the promised land, and then let's go to Amos 3:2. Let's see what it say. Yeah, so Almighty Yah gave the Israelites, man, the true way, and then that's what would make them other folks mad. You know what I'm saying? Look. All right. Hear this word that the Elohim has spoken, and against you, O children of Israel, and against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt. You only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore will I punish you for all your iniquities. See, we had the covenant in the right way of worship. That's why we got punished and going through these tribulations by the folks right there. It's because that they didn't get the covenant. So we fell into their hands. And they've been destroying us ever since, because Prophet Abraham didn't give Ishmael the right, the firstborn rights. Edom gonna be mad because Edom didn't get the firstborn rights. You know what I'm saying? He didn't get the firstborn rights, and then they not gonna follow Almighty Yah and believe in what their father Abraham. You know, Edom not gonna believe in what his father Isaac taught about Almighty Yah. Ishmael not gonna believe in what Abraham, our father, taught about Almighty Yah, because they didn't get the first rights in the first things, because Almighty Yah knew how that they would be in the end. So that's why come them folks our enemies and so forth. This is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood.